I disappeared from my cheating wife's life after hearing she called me a loser and slept with my best friend. My name is Jake, and I'm 35 years old. I never imagined that my life could turn upside down in just a single night. For years, I thought I had everything. A stable career, a loving wife, and a best friend who had always been there for me. Emma and I had been married for 8 years, and though we had our share of issues, I always believed we were strong enough to get through anything together. It was a Friday night when things took a turn. I was supposed to meet my best friend, Chris, for drinks at our usual bar. Chris and I had known each other since high school, and we were inseparable. He was like a brother to me. But that night, he canceled at the last minute, saying something about an urgent work issue. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, life gets in the way sometimes. I decided to go home early instead of staying out. I figured Emma would be happy to see me. We could have a quiet night in, maybe order some takeout, and catch up on our favorite shows. As I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but a nagging feeling gnawed at me. When I walked into the house, the lights were dim, and there was an eerie stillness in the air. Emma wasn't in the living room or the kitchen. I called out her name, but there was no response. My heart started to race as I headed upstairs. As I climbed the steps, I heard faint voices, whispers, followed by a giggle. That was when my stomach dropped. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Emma's voice clearly. She wasn't alone. "I can't believe he's such a loser," I heard her say, followed by a familiar male voice. "Chris." My breath caught in my throat. My best friend? What the hell was going on? I inched closer, trying to remain calm, but the rage and confusion were bubbling inside me. "He has no idea, does he?" Chris said with a chuckle. "No, he doesn't," Emma replied. "He's so clueless. I feel like I'm wasting my life with him. I mean, how could I stay married to someone like that forever? He's going nowhere, Chris." "You know that." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my back. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own wife, Emma, the woman I had promised to love and cherish, was talking about me like I was nothing. And with my best friend, no less. "I've been thinking about us," Chris said, his voice lowering. "I want to be with you, Em. But you need to decide. We can't keep sneaking around forever." "I know," she whispered back. "It's just, Jake has no clue. He still thinks we're fine. I feel guilty sometimes, but then I think about how he's just not the man I thought I married. You're different, Chris. You make me feel alive." I clenched my fists so tightly that my knuckles turned white. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? All the late nights Emma had been working late, all the times Chris had bailed on our plans. It all started to make sense. I felt sick. Before I could stop myself, pushed open the door. The look of shock on both their faces was seared into my memory. Emma, her hair tousled and wearing the silk robe I had bought her for our anniversary, gasped as she scrambled to cover herself. Chris looked equally stunned, sitting at the edge of the bed, shirtless, his face draining of color. "Jake?" Emma's voice wavered, her eyes wide with panic. "Jake, man, I can explain," Chris stammered, getting to his feet, but I didn't let him finish. "Explain?" I said, my voice trembling with fury. "Explain how my wife is in bed with my best friend? Explain how long you've been lying to my face?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I snapped. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I just walked in on my wife cheating on me with the one person I trusted more than anyone in the world. Chris tried to step forward, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "Don't. Just don't." The silence in the room was suffocating. I could see Emma struggling to come up with something to say, some excuse that would make all of this go away. There was no turning back now. The truth was out, and there was no undoing what I had just witnessed. "Jake, please," Emma began, her voice breaking. "I never wanted you to find out this way." "This way?" I spat, my voice laced with venom. "How else was I supposed to find out, Emma? Were you planning on telling me over dinner? Or were you just going to keep playing house with me while you carried on with him behind my back?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. I felt nothing but anger and betrayal. The woman I had loved for so long had just shattered everything we had built. And Chris, the man I had considered family, had been in on it the whole time. I need you to leave, I said, my voice cold and detached. Both of you. Now. Jake, please don't do this, Chris said, stepping toward me. We can talk about this. We didn't mean for it to happen like this. I shook my head, cutting him off. There's nothing to talk about. You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Emma sobbed as she tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. You threw away our marriage, Emma? For what? For this? I gestured toward Chris, my disgust evident. Get out. I don't want to see either of you again. Chris hesitated for a moment, then grabbed his shirt and hurried out of the room, avoiding my gaze. Emma, still crying, stood there, looking at me as if she was expecting some sort of forgiveness. But there was nothing left to say. The damage was done. As they left the house, the weight of what had just happened settled on me. I collapsed onto the floor, my body shaking with anger and grief. Everything I had known, my marriage, my friendship, my entire life, was gone in the blink of an eye. I had discovered the painful truth, but it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The shock from the previous night left me numb, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Emma and Chris had left my house, and the emptiness that followed was suffocating. I felt as if my whole world had been dismantled piece by piece, and now I was left with the jagged fragments of a life I once knew. The morning came slowly. The sun peeked through the blinds, casting a muted light over the room, and I felt the weight of exhaustion pulling me down. I dragged myself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, where I made a pot of coffee, heaved though I had little appetite. I needed to clear my head, to make sense of everything that had happened. As I sipped the bitter coffee, I noticed Emma's phone sitting on the kitchen counter. It had been left behind in the chaos of the night before. My fingers itched to pick it up, but I hesitated. I knew I should respect her privacy, but I was desperate for answers. Anything to make sense of the betrayal. Finally, I reached for the phone, feeling a pang of guilt, but overriding it with the need to understand. I unlocked it using the face recognition feature, which she had never bothered to change. The home screen showed a picture of us from happier times. Cruel reminder of what we once had. I went through her messages, call log, and her emails. Nothing prepared me for the flood of revelations that came next. Emma had been texting Chris frequently, their conversations filled with a blend of affection and explicit plans for their future together. I read through their exchanges, feeling a hollow ache as the depth of their relationship unfolded before me. One message stood out. It was from the night before, sent just minutes before Chris had arrived at the house. It read, I can't wait for tonight. Let's make the most of it. I'm so glad we're finally together. My heart sank as I realized that their affair wasn't a fleeting mistake but something that had been building for a long time. I scrolled further and found a voicemail from Chris, left the previous week. I hesitated before pressing play, my pulse quickening. The voicemail started with Chris's familiar voice, but the words that followed were anything but comforting. Hey, Em, it's me. I know things have been tense with Jake lately. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I can't stand seeing you unhappy, and I think we both know that Jake isn't the right guy for you. We have something special, and I want us to be together. I know it's complicated right now, but we'll figure it out. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. The voicemail was a mix of deceit and manipulation. Chris's words were laced with promises and reassurances, painting a picture of a future I was no longer a part of. The final blow came when I checked Emma's calendar. There were several entries marked with dates and times. Secret dates with Chris, marked as special events and important meetings. My heart shattered as I saw how meticulously they had planned their time together, right under my nose. As the morning wore on, I felt a growing sense of urgency. I couldn't sit idly while they lived their lives, seemingly unaffected by the pain they had caused. I needed to confront them again, to demand answers and make them face the reality of their action. I picked up my phone and called Chris. It rang a few times before he answered, his voice casual and unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Hey Jake, he said, a hint of surprise in his tone. What's up? I know everything, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know about you and Emma. I've seen the messages, the voicemails, everything. I need to talk to you. Now. There was a brief silence on the other end before Chris replied. Jake, don't try to explain. Cut him off. I'm not interested in hearing excuses. I need you to come over. We're going to settle this. Chris agreed reluctantly, and within an hour he was at my doorstep. I let him in, feeling a cold rage bubbling just beneath the surface. We went to the living room, where I had set up the laptop with all the evidence I had uncovered. Emma would arrive soon. I had made sure of that. Chris looked around nervously, his eyes darting from the laptop to me. Jake, I know you're angry, but… Angry? I interrupted. You think anger is all I feel right now? I'm devastated, Chris. You were supposed to be my friend, and Emma, she was my wife. How could you do this? Chris's face flushed with guilt, but he remained silent. He couldn't meet my eyes, and that spoke louder than any apology he could muster. The doorbell rang, and Emma entered, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked between Chris and me, realizing the confrontation was inevitable. I watched as she took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. The damage was done. Jake, Emma began, her voice shaky. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Save it, I said firmly. I've heard enough apologies to last a lifetime. I want the truth. How long has this been going on? Were you planning on telling me? Did you ever intend to be honest with me about any of this? Emma's eyes filled with fresh tears. It started a few months ago. Chris and I, had been growing closer, and then, it just happened. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to face you. Chris stepped forward, his voice low. Jake, I never meant to hurt you. I was your friend, and I should have been honest. I'm sorry, Save your apologies, I snapped. It's too late for that. You've both made your choices, and now you'll have to live with them. Emma and Chris stood there, their faces a mixture of regret and helplessness. I could see the weight of their actions pressing down on them, but it was little comfort to me. Trust I had placed in them was irreparably broken, and the future I had envisioned was in ruin. As they left, I felt a hollow emptiness. I had hoped for some form of resolution. All I was left with was the painful knowledge of their betrayal. The days stretched out before me, a reminder of the new reality I had to face. A life without Emma and a friendship that had been destroyed. Betrayal had unfolded completely, leaving me with a broken heart and a future that was uncertain. I was left to pick up the pieces and decide what came next, knowing that the road ahead would be filled with challenges and heartbreak. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a blur. I wandered through life in a daze, caught between anger and despair. My home, once a sanctuary, had become a place of constant reminders of the betrayal that had shattered my world. Each room echoed with memories of happier times, now tainted by the pain of recent events. Emma and Chris had left, and their absence only amplified the emptiness I felt. I avoided contact with both of them, unable to face the reality of our fractured relationships. The weight of their betrayal pressed down on me, and I found it difficult to focus on anything other than the deep sense of loss that had consumed me. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, staring blankly at the television, my mind was racing. The silence of the house was deafening. I tried to distract myself with the hum of the TV, but nothing could drown out the painful thoughts that kept intruding. I was lost in a fog of sorrow and anger, unsure of what to do next. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping me out of my stupor. I picked it up and saw a message from Sarah, a former colleague who had been a friendly face during my tough times at work. We had stayed in touch sporadically, and her message was a simple check-in. Hey Jake, just wanted to see how you're doing. Hope you're okay. Let me know if you need to talk. I hesitated before responding. Something about her genuine concern made me feel less isolated. I typed a quick reply. Hey Sarah, I'm not doing great, but I appreciate the check-in. I could use someone to talk to. A few minutes later, Sarah called. Her voice was soothing, and I felt a pang of gratitude for her reaching out. We talked for a while, and as I recounted the events of the past week, I could hear the concern in her voice. I can't believe what you've been through, Sarah said softly. You must be feeling overwhelmed right now. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to take time to heal. Her words resonated with me, and I realized how important it was to have someone to confide in. Sarah's kindness provided a small flicker of light in the darkness that had enveloped me. But despite the comfort of our conversation, the harsh reality of my situation was still very much present. As the days turned into weeks, I struggled to regain some semblance of normalcy. I threw myself into work, hoping that staying busy would help me avoid the constant pain I felt at home. But no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, the memories of Emma and Chris, always there, lurking just beneath the surface. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, I returned home to find an envelope waiting for me on the doorstep. It was from Emma. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, I opened it and found a handwritten letter. "Jake, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm writing to apologize for everything. I made terrible choices and caused you so much pain. I wish I could undo what's been done, but I know I can't. I'm sorry. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I read the letter several times, each word stinging like a fresh wound. Emma's apology felt empty, a desperate attempt to absolve herself of guilt. I crumpled the letter and threw it into the trash. Couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The weeks dragged on, and I found myself increasingly isolated. Friends reached out, but I was reluctant to accept their invitations. I felt like a shell of my former self, unable to connect with anyone or find joy in the things that once brought me happiness. One night, as I lay in bed, the weight of everything seemed almost unbearable. The emotional storm that had been raging inside me reached its peak, and I felt a profound sense of despair. I stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face, and I questioned the purpose of it all. Was this all there was left for me? A life filled with heartache and loneliness? I considered the possibility of starting over. It felt overwhelming. I had invested so much of myself into my relationship with Emma and my friendship with Chris that the thought of rebuilding felt like an insurmountable task. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't continue living in this state of perpetual pain. I sat up and reached for my phone. I needed to make a decision, to find a way out of this emotional abyss. I opened the Notes app and began to type. I need to change my life. I can't stay here, stuck in the past, surrounded by reminders of what was lost. I need to find a new direction, a new purpose. I don't know where to start, but I know I can't keep living like it. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of something new. The act of acknowledging my need for change was both liberating and terrifying. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I couldn't continue down the path I was on. I had to take control of my life and find a way to heal. The next day, I began to make plans for my future. Started looking into therapy to help me process the pain and work through my emotion. I reached out to old friends, reconnecting with people I had lost touch with over the years. And I began to think about new opportunities, both personally and professionally. It wasn't an easy journey, and there were many setbacks along the way. But the decision to take charge of my life marked the beginning of a new chapter. I was determined to rebuild, to find meaning and purpose, despite the heartbreak I had endured. As I took the first steps toward healing, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a guarantee of happiness, but it was a sign that I was moving forward. The emotional storm that had engulfed me was starting to subside, replaced by a sense of resolve and determination. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging. For the first time in a long while, I felt ready to face it. The decision to leave my old life behind felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I had spent weeks mired in sadness, attempting to make sense of the betrayal that had shattered my world. But now I felt a strong, almost primal urge to escape, away from the memories, away from the people who had caused me so much pain. It was a rainy morning when I began my plan. I packed only the essentials into a single duffel bag. Few changes of clothes, some toiletries, and my laptop. I left behind the familiar comforts of home, a place where Emma and I had built our life together, now tainted by memories I couldn't bear to face. I didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye to anyone. The friends who had reached out in the weeks following the confrontation were left in the dark. I didn't want to explain or justify my decision. I simply needed to disappear. Pain was too fresh, and I needed space to find myself again. With my bag in hand, I headed to the train station. The rain pattered softly against the pavement as I walked, each drop echoing the sadness I felt inside. I bought a one-way ticket to a small town several states away, a place where no one knew me, where I could start fresh. As the train pulled away from the station, I gazed out of the window, watching the cityscape gradually fade into the distance. I felt a mix of relief and melancholy. Leaving behind everything I had known was daunting, but it was also a necessary step toward reclaiming my life. The familiar surroundings of my past were slipping away, and with them, the constant reminders of my heartbreak. The journey was long, and I spent much of it lost in thought. The rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks became a comforting background noise, a steady reminder that I was moving forward, leaving the old life behind. I contemplated the new beginnings that awaited me, uncertain of what to expect, but eager for change. When the train finally reached my destination, I disembarked and took a deep breath of the crisp, unfamiliar air. The small town had a charm to it, with its quaint streets and cozy shops. It was a far cry from the bustling city I had left behind, and it seemed like the perfect place for me to find some peace. I checked into a modest hotel, choosing a place that offered temporary accommodations without too many questions. The room was simple but clean, and as I settled in, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It was a blank slate, a new beginning. I was free to reinvent myself, to explore who I was beyond the shadow of my past. Over the next few days, I explored the town, slowly acclimating to my new surroundings. I found solace in the quiet streets, the slow pace of life, and the anonymity that came with being a stranger. I visited local cafes, took long walks by the river, and began to appreciate the simple pleasures that had once been overshadowed by the chaos of my old life. Despite the initial sense of liberation, there were moments when the weight of my decisions settled heavily on my shoulders. I missed the familiarity of my old routines, comfort of knowing where everything was. But those feelings were quickly overshadowed by the growing sense of freedom and possibility. I was finally in a place where I could focus on healing and rediscovering myself. I spent time reflecting on the past, processing my emotions, and gradually letting go of the bitterness and pain. It wasn't an easy process, and there were moments of doubt and sadness. But with each passing day, I felt more in control of my own destiny. The shadows of my old life began to recede, replaced by the promise of a new future. One evening, as I sat in a small park overlooking the town, I felt a profound sense of relief. The weight of my past no longer felt like a heavy burden, but rather a distant memory. I watched as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the horizon, and I allowed myself to hope again. The future was uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities. As I embraced my new life, I made a conscious effort to connect with the community around me. I volunteered at a local charity, met new people, and began to rebuild my sense of purpose. Each step, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming my identity and finding peace. Vanishing into the shadows had been a necessary step in my journey. It allowed me to distance myself from the pain and betrayal, to find a new path away from the remnants of my past. The shadows of my old life were fading, and in their place, a new and hopeful future was beginning to take shape. The first few months in this small town had been a whirlwind of self-discovery for me. I'd settled into a routine that balanced exploring the local community and working part-time at a bookstore. The transition from my old life to this new one had been challenging, but it was starting to feel more natural. Each day, I found myself a bit more at ease with the decision to start over. One crisp autumn morning, I decided to visit a local cafe that had caught my eye. The cafe, the cozy nook, was charming with its warm lighting, vintage decor, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. As I walked in, I was welcomed by the friendly chatter of patrons and the soft strains of jazz music in the background. I approached the counter, where a woman in her mid-30s with a warm smile and kind eyes was arranging pastries and preparing drinks. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "What can I get for you today?" I returned her smile. "Hi. I'll have a medium coffee and a blueberry muffin, please." She nodded and started preparing my order. "Coming right up. I'm Leah, by the way. You're new around here, welcome. We're always glad to meet newcomers." "Thanks, Leah," I said, feeling comforted by her friendly demeanor. "I am new. Just moved here a few months ago. Leah handed me my coffee and muffin. Well, it's good to have you. We have a pretty tight-knit community here. If you ever need recommendations or just want to chat, feel free to stop by. I took my seat at a cozy corner table, grateful for the small but genuine interaction. I sipped my coffee, savoring the rich, bold flavor, and glanced around the cafe, appreciating the inviting atmosphere. Leah's warmth and the cafe's ambiance were a refreshing change from the isolation I had felt in the early days of my new life. Over the next few weeks, I became a regular at the cozy nook. Leah and I engaged in conversations that quickly turned into a friendship. We talked about everything from local events to our favorite books. I valued having someone to talk to about my experiences and my past. One afternoon, as I sat at my usual table working on a novel I was writing, Leah approached with a steaming cup of coffee. "I thought you might need a refill," she said with a smile. I looked up, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thanks, Leah. I didn't realize how much I needed this." Leah sat down across from me, her expression thoughtful. "You seem to have been settling in well. How's the new job going?" "It's good," I replied. "It's different from what I used to do, but I'm starting to enjoy it. I think it's helping me find some perspective." Leah nodded. "It's amazing how a change of scenery can do that. Sometimes it's the little things that help us reflect and grow." I took a sip of my coffee and sighed. "You're right. I've been thinking a lot about my past lately, about what went wrong and what I want moving forward. It's been a painful process, but I feel like I'm finally starting to see a way forward." Leah's eyes softened with empathy. "It sounds like you've been through a lot. Sometimes it takes a while to find our way again, but it's encouraging to see you working through it. You're taking positive steps, and that's important. I've started volunteering at a local charity," it continued. "It's been a good way to connect with the community and give back. It's helping me feel like I'm part of something." Leah smiled. "That's wonderful. Giving back can be incredibly fulfilling, and it's a great way to meet people who share similar values. It sounds like you're on the right track." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude. "I really appreciate your support, Leah. You've been a big part of my adjustment to this new life. I wasn't sure what to expect when I moved here, but I'm starting to feel like I belong." Leah grinned. "I'm glad to hear that. You're always welcome here, Jake. And if you ever need more support or just someone to talk to, don't hesitate to reach out." Our conversation was interrupted by a customer coming in, but Leah's kindness and the genuine connection we had formed remained with me. I had found more than just a new place to live. I had discovered a new sense of purpose and community. As the weeks passed, I continued to rebuild my life. I focused on my work, deepened my involvement in community activities, and maintained my growing friendship with Leah. I began to explore the town more, finding solace in its peaceful corners and hidden gems. One evening, as I walked along a quiet path near the river, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but I was finally starting to see the fruits of my efforts. Past still lingered in my memories, but it no longer defined me. I had forged a new path, one filled with hope and the promise of new beginnings. Leah's friendship and the support of the community had been instrumental in my healing process. I knew that while my past would always be a part of me, the future mattered now. Each passing day made me feel more confident in my new life, ready to embrace whatever came next. Then, one crisp winter morning, as I was finishing up my shift at the bookstore, I received an unexpected phone call. Caller ID displayed a number I didn't recognize. Something compelled me to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice cautious. "Jake, it's Emma," came the familiar voice on the other end. The tone was uncertain, tinged with a mix of nervousness and regret. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I know it's been a while." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected to hear from Emma again, especially not after everything that had happened. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "What do you want, Emma?" "I know it's sudden, and I'm sorry for reaching out like this," Emma said. "But I need to talk to you. It's important. I'm in town and—" "Why now?" I interrupted, my voice edged with frustration. "Why after all this time?" There was a pause on the other end before Emma responded. "I've been trying to find the right moment. I know I've hurt you and I can't undo what's been done, but I need to explain. Please, Jake, can we meet? I was torn. The pain of the past still lingered, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face Emma again. Part of me wanted closure, a chance to confront the past and finally put it to rest. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Fine. Let's meet. Where and when?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe in town, one that I frequented often. The choice seemed fitting, a place where I had found comfort and new beginnings. As the meeting time approached, my anxiety grew. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I needed to face this confrontation with clarity. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted Emma sitting at a corner table. She looked older, more weary than I remembered. Her once vibrant demeanor was now subdued, and her eyes held a depth of sorrow that mirrored my own. I approached the table, my heart pounding. "Emma." "Jake," Emma said softly, standing to greet me. Her eyes were filled with tears. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." I sat down across from her, feeling a mixture of anger and curiosity. "What do you want to say?" Emma took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but I want to explain why I did what I did. I've been struggling with my own guilt and regret, and I thought maybe if I could explain, it might help both of us move on." I listened, my expression unreadable. "Go ahead." Emma began to recount the events from her perspective, her voice trembling as she spoke. "When I first started seeing Chris, I felt lost and unhappy in our relationship. I know that's no excuse, but I was searching for something, anything, that would make me feel alive again. Chris was there, and I made a terrible mistake." My jaw tightened. "And what about Chris? Did he play a role in this?" Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, he did. But I was the one who made the choice. I hurt you, and I deeply regret that. I thought I could find happiness elsewhere, but it only led to more pain. I'm so sorry, Jake." I took a moment to absorb her words. The explanations were painful to hear, but they didn't change the fact that the betrayal had been a deep wound. "Why come here now, Emma? Why not leave the past where it belongs?" Emma's voice was filled with desperation. "Because I need closure too. I've been struggling to move on, and I realize now that facing you and apologizing is part of my healing process. I want to make amends, if that's even possible." I studied her for a moment, feeling the weight of my own unresolved feelings. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Emma. What happened between us was a significant betrayal. It's not something I can easily forget." Emma nodded, her expression resigned. "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to be honest with you and to say how sorry I am for everything." The conversation fell into a heavy silence. I stared out the window, my mind racing through the memories of the past and the pain they had caused. After a few moments, I looked back at Emma. "I appreciate your honesty," I said quietly. "And I appreciate you coming here to face me. I'm still working through my own feelings, and it will take time. But this conversation has helped me see that maybe I can finally let go of the anger." Emma offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Jake. I wish you all the best. I hope you find the happiness and peace you deserve." We spent a few more moments in silence before Emma stood up to leave. I watched her go, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a sense of closure. The past had resurfaced unexpectedly, but the meeting had provided a form of resolution. As I left the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of clarity. The past was a part of me, but it no longer controlled my future. I had come to terms with the betrayal and was ready to move forward with my life. The journey of healing and self-discovery wasn't over, but I felt more equipped to face whatever came next. I had confronted the past, found closure, and was now focused on embracing the future with hope and resilience. The encounter with Emma had been a pivotal moment, a final reckoning that allowed me to fully close that chapter of my life. With the past behind me, I looked forward to continuing my journey, knowing that the strength I had gained from the experience would guide me through the challenges ahead.